What's up, guys? This is Kephas.
World of Warcraft's latest story, The Legacy of Arathor, has been getting a lot of attention, and sadly, I don't mean that in a good way. Unfortunately, it seems as though WoW's lore has been farming multiple L's, one after the other, for the past few expansions, and it doesn't look like things are improving, even with the return of Chris Metzen. I've been into the Warcraft story for a very long time. Not so much these days, but for a good stretch there. I'm not a lore expert, I'm a discoverer, someone who's always learning and fascinated by the world Blizzard built. I remember spending hours watching people like Noble dive deep into the lore, breaking down characters, events, all the little connections. I was just blown away by the sheer scale of it all. To this day, I think the Lich King storyline might be my favorite in any game. His fall from grace, the tragedy, the characters around him, it was incredible. And while WoW's story has always been a little derivative, it borrows from fantasy tropes and other media, that's never really been a problem. It still had emotional weight, it still felt grounded in a world where choices and consequences mattered. I know not everyone cares about the story in WoW, and that's fine. If you're one of those players, this probably isn't going to be the conversation for you. But for those of us who do care, it's become clear that something has changed, something has shifted, and it's left a lot of us feeling disconnected. Now, before I go further, let me get ahead of a few things. I don't want this to devolve into the same culture war nonsense that so many conversations like this do. It'd be easy for me to just throw around the word woke and chalk it all up to that, and I'll be transparent, I don't entirely disagree with some of the criticisms people have when they talk about these changes in media. But I don't think reducing the conversation to buzzwords helps anyone. At the same time, I don't want to be tone policed either. I don't want people moralizing over every point I bring up or assuming the worst about me just because you might not agree. This isn't about attacking people, this is about storytelling, and if we're going to talk about storytelling, then we need to have an honest conversation. The heart of the issue with WoW's story right now is a massive shift in tone, feel, and narrative focus. WoW's story used to be more complex. It was darker, grittier, more willing to tackle difficult themes. It felt like a world where actions had weight, where characters had flaws and had to grow through them. Now, it feels like a sanitized young adult novel, like something straight out of a Pixar or Disney production aimed at adults who never left Tumblr. And that's the problem. It doesn't feel like Warcraft anymore. The tone is off, the grit is gone, and this latest patch is a perfect example of that. So let's talk about the legacy of Arathor. It brought us back to the Arathi Highlands, with a focus on Faerun Lothar and the descendants of Stromgarde. There's a story here about rediscovering heritage, confronting prejudice, and uniting across old divides. You've got this human supremacist faction called the Red Dawn, made up of Scarlet Crusade, Defias Brotherhood, and Syndicate faction members. It's a faction that feels like it's meant to invoke some real-world parallels. Xenophobia, nationalism, nostalgia for a pure past. It's not subtle, and that's fine if it's handled well. But if it had been handled with any less grace, Marin Trollbane would have been shouting "Make Arathor great again" while claiming to rebuild Thoradin's wall and making the orcs pay for it. You have Danath Trollbane, one of the few old guard characters left. This guy had lived through the horrors of the First and Second Wars. He's lost people, he's seen the worst of the orcs, and suddenly we find him being all about peace and reconciliation.
But the sons of Lothar promote tolerance and mirth.
Fuck.
I'm not against characters growing, but we didn't see that journey. It just kind of happens off screen. And when you're dealing with a story world built on interracial conflict, literally a race war. You can't just flip the switch like that. That's not how good writing works. It's not satisfying. If Danath has changed, show us why. Show us the conflict, the self-reflection, the pain of reconciling with people he once hated, instead of leaving us wondering why a guy named Trollbane is suddenly a peaceful old man who banishes his niece and supports the heroine. That's not good storytelling, that's agenda fulfillment. If you want a good example of how to handle racism or prejudice with depth and care, look at Ip Man 4. In that movie, you have the gunnery sergeant, a man who holds deep prejudice, but he isn't just a cartoon villain. He has layers. He's shaped by his environment, his pride, his fear of losing status. He's definitely wrong, and he's arguably not a great person, but he's also not hollow. And then you have the Chinese Tai Chi master who doesn't like Chinese martial arts being taught to Westerners. You sympathize with him, but at the end of the day, he has racist views. And yet, he's not dismissed as evil. He's given space to grow. Even the white guy who fights in the alley, he's loud, arrogant, but he's not a racist. He respects skill, and that's the point. The movie doesn't lecture, it depicts. It shows people grappling with their beliefs, and through that, it creates meaningful moments. Contrast that with the Red Dawn faction in WoW, and they're just supremacists. They're evil, and that's it. There's no room for exploration, for growth, or for tension. It's black and white. It's flat, which is the very antithesis of what World of Warcraft was originally built on. And now I want to pivot to something else, and maybe even something more personal. I'm legally blind, visually impaired, and I remember raiding with a couple of Blizzard devs back in Legion. I'm not going to say who they were, but they were really nice guys. We used to have really fun conversations. And I remember one night one of them asked me how I felt about being represented in the game now that demon hunters were a class and they don't have eyesight. I wasn't offended by the question, but it did give me pause because I never really thought about it like that. I never looked at demon hunters and saw myself. They chose blindness. I didn't. They have supernatural abilities to compensate. I don't. It didn't feel like representation. It felt like a stretch. And don't get me wrong, I love demon hunters. They're really fun to play, but I've never needed a character to share my traits to feel connected to them. What matters is the emotional connection, the internal journey. When Uther talks about grace, I feel that. When Jaina overcomes grief, I connect with that. When Eitrig and Tyrion set aside their prejudices, that means a lot to me. I don't have a problem with representation, but when it's done poorly, it doesn't feel empowering. It feels patronizing. You want a good disabled character? Look at Daredevil. Matt Murdock is compelling because his blindness is part of a larger arc. He struggles, adapts, excels. He isn't just the blind character, he's a human being. Compare that to putting Khadgar in a wheelchair. His wheels don't even move. He's a mage, and it doesn't make any sense in universe. It doesn't tell a story.
Kerdrin keeps saying I should just ride a griffin around. That seems terribly inconvenient, if you ask me. I much prefer this chair.
Could that be because Archmage Modera designed it for you herself?
Why, Ilaria? Whatever are you implying?
That's stupid! You're stupid! Stop being stupid!
It doesn't show adaptation, it just feels like a checkbox. And when representation is reduced to that, it insults the very people it claims to support. The reason why I'm saying it's being used for representation is because whenever this plot point gets criticized, this is always the defense that people seem to want to use. And I don't want to dismiss anybody who might actually feel represented by this, but at the same time, I don't think that absolves it from criticism either. One of my favorite depictions of a disability in video games is with Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater and Big Boss. There's a moment in that game, an iconic one, where Snake loses his eye while protecting someone he cares about. He didn't choose it, it wasn't symbolic, it was an accident in the middle of a brutal scene, and it left a permanent mark on him. What followed wasn't just a character with an eye patch. The story actually explores how he adapted. The HUD changes, his aim shifts. There's a moment of frustration and then, slowly, resilience, support from allies, and a new normal. It's not just about making a character look cool with an eye patch. It's about showing how trauma shapes someone, how they overcome it, how the loss means something. Now think about Khadgar. The story didn't even take the time to explain the nature of his injuries. If it had shown him grappling with them, struggling, adapting, finding magical solutions, or even resisting magical fixes to preserve humility or honor, then it might have meant something more. If we had seen a great arc where he went from despair to adaptation to maybe even empowering other disabled people in Azeroth to live with dignity and resourcefulness, it would have been powerful. Instead, he's just using an incredibly impractical solution in the context of the universe, something that most disabled people I know, including myself, would never do. No consequence, no arc, we don't even know how or why, we don't even know if it bothers him. The story treats it as a cosmetic update, not a lived reality, and that's where the comparison to Snake becomes so painful, because that is how you do it right. You show the moment of loss, you let the audience sit with the character's fear, frustration, or even rage, and then you walk with them through the climb back, because it's the climb that creates connection. And some might argue that the chair is just there to be visual storytelling. Sure, but it's not really good storytelling, is it? This is a smaller point, but it matters, I think, to a lot of people, including myself. It's about design direction. A lot of these new characters don't look like they belong in an epic fantasy setting. They look like they just walked out of a Starbucks. Anduin used to look regal, now he just looks like some dude. Characters like Toddy Whiskers, ugh, even that name bothers me, feel more like cartoons than citizens of a war-torn world. All of my points are subjective, and this one is by far the most subjective for sure, but thematic cohesion matters, and when you strip that away, you lose immersion, and again, that's a tonal shift that matters. I think a lot of people can agree that this isn't a WoW specific problem. We've seen these same issues in Marvel, Star Wars, and even gaming at large. It's this obsession with surface level diversity, feel good messages, and safe storytelling. It's not that inclusion is bad, it's certainly not. It's that inclusion has replaced depth. Characters aren't being written to be human. They're being written to check a demographic box, and when people criticize that, they're immediately labeled as problematic. That's a problem in itself, because we need to be able to critique storytelling without being moralized into silence. For WoW specifically, let's zoom out a bit. Right now, WoW is in the middle of the World Soul Saga. Big cosmic stakes, Void Lords, Titans, the heart of Azeroth, and that's fine, but it means nothing if the smaller human stories fall apart. Legacy of Arathor tried to ground things again, but it felt disconnected. It was rushed. There's potential in the story of Stromgarde and the Arathi Highlands, but it needed time and it needed teeth. Chris Metzen came back. That gave people hope. But even he said that decision making is more democratized now.
Under the hood a little bit, it's interesting in how when I came back on the team, the development process and even the conceptualizing process, you know, like where does the expansion take place? What are the main themes? What's the focus? Really had become much more democratized, right? And people were, you know, had kind of found their voice in the balance of all the special teams that comprise the World of Warcraft team.
That might be part of the problem, because what WoW needs isn't more committees, it needs vision. It needs someone willing to write stories that are messy, human, and hard to resolve. Stories that reflect the complexity of the world, not just the messaging of the moment. And that's where I'm at with it. I still love the game. I still want to believe in its world and its characters, but that only works if the people writing the story take it seriously, if they're willing to go deep, not just go loud. And now I'd love to hear from you, respectfully. Let's have a real conversation, not the usual culture war garbage, no moralizing, no tribalism, just real people talking about a story we all care about. Either way, thank you for watching, and with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button, and feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.